Sequels, sequels, sequels. What makes a good sequel? Well, that's a difficult question to answer, but there have been so many games that people have spent years begging for a sequel for. Games like Legend of the Dragoon, Eternal Darkness, Sunset Overdrive, and many more. In truth, I could actually make this entire video just about how many of us are on our hands and knees every night praying to our great creator that they'll instill the idea in some game studio's head to finally give us a follow-up to our beloved games that we've been waiting for eons for. And while that would be fun to make, I don't think many people want to see that. Yet. Today, or whatever time you're watching this video at, we'll be talking about sequels. What makes a good one, what makes a great one, and what makes an outstanding one. To start off our retrospective here, we must travel back in time to the year 1995, when mankind peaked in terms of artistic creation. A group of talents got together named Hironobu Sakaguchi, Yuji Horii, Takeshi Takito, Masato Kato, and a little someone named Akira Toriyama. These men were all experts in their craft, having such works as the Dragon Quest series, Final Fantasy, and even Dragon Ball under their belts. With their combined strength and genius, the human race would be changed forever and would be given the greatest piece of media to ever grace our eyes. The King, the Majesty, the Champion, Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger was a crowning achievement in gaming, and while I could spend the next extremely long video gushing about it, I'm not going to do that, because that can be reserved for a future video. Also, given that this video is going to reference Chrono Trigger a lot, I'm going to just count this entire video as one big Chrono Trigger mention. I don't think there's ever been a game that's given me so much to talk about since Chrono Trigger, but this video isn't going to be about Chrono Trigger. Instead, it's going to be its sequel, Chrono Cross. Some people might be asking, wait, there's a sequel to Chrono Trigger? And the answer is, there is technically two. One was a visual novel only released in Japan originally for the Super Famicom, and the other was Chrono Cross, which kind of retcons that visual novel. Which, that visual novel was released as part of a remaster set that was released for this game later on. I've actually met many people who have never heard of this game despite being very familiar with Chrono Trigger, and somebody who just had no idea it even existed. It came and went back in the year of Lavos, or 1999 for those who are uninitiated, or 2000 in the West. Part of the reason why this was somewhat forgotten though is because for a long time this game was locked behind the original PlayStation with no other way to play it. And by the time it came out, the PlayStation 2 was only a few months away. Unlike the original game, which got ported to iOS and Android, a few times actually, the Nintendo DS, Windows, and every single toilet in existence, Chrono Cross would remain locked to a single console for over 2 decades until it was ported to modern consoles such as the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and even Windows in 2022 as a remaster. For the purpose of this video, I'll be using the Switch version because it was available as a physical copy, and I'm all about physical media when it's available. Chrono Cross is actually a game that I own the original version of, but my experience with it back in the day was that it was a game that I played maybe for an hour, got distracted by other things, and moved on to said other things. I didn't finally get around to taking on this backlog game of mine until this year, where I finally finished it only a few months ago. Finally give me at least some form of closure while I get misled by rumors of Chrono Trigger remake from other various YouTubers. It's nice seeing this lesser known entry in the Chrono franchise see some new life, and then me sitting down for a good 30 hours to make the commitment to playing it for this video. So please enjoy while I do a retrospective on a sequel before I've done the original game, despite hyping up the original game multiple times in my other videos. Sit back and get your comments criticizing random mistakes I made in this video ready, and enjoy a 30-plus-year-old man play a sequel to the greatest game of all time for the first time ever. This is Chrono Cross. I'm just going to spoil the rest of this video here, but Chrono Cross definitely fails at being a sequel, and we're going to go over why in extensive detail, so stick around. But that isn't to say it's a bad game. In fact, I argue it's actually a pretty decent game with some problems. And I'd likely think more highly of it if it didn't have Chrono in the title of the game, because this game is so far removed from what made Chrono Trigger great Almost every single aspect of the game's design seems to go against what Chrono Trigger was. Most of the battle system has been changed to a stamina-based system where the player uses stamina points every turn to execute actions, but never really seems to work properly to me. Some actions use up less stamina than others, and the idea is that lower stamina attacks are more likely to hit but do less damage. The trade-off being that you're given more of a less certainty to hit, and the higher stamina attacks have a lower chance of hitting but do more damage. The chance of higher stamina attacks hitting goes up with each subsequent hit though. You run out of stamina and that character's turn is over while you wait for your stamina to recharge. Did you get all that? Good, because forget it all, because the game just seems to ignore stamina in so many instances. You can have a full stamina bar left, but enemies just decide it's their turn anyway. It honestly feels a little bit clunky, like this game is trying to be a traditional turn-based RPG, which is fine, I like traditional turn-based RPGs, except it's also trying hard to be different and failing at it. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't expecting the basic combat mechanics to be just a carbon copy of the original game, but I would have just preferred a traditional turn-based system over whatever this situation is. Experimenting is a good thing sometimes, but every now and then, that experimenting ends up with awkward results that don't really land. Just like my stomach after eating 4 burritos, so much of this just feels off. So much of the battle mechanics just feel awkward and strange. You never really pack the kind of punches that you expect, and so much of the magic system feels like it's very weak. Magic and text are now delegated to a grid that you assign skills to. This grid is also home to your items. What this translates to in actual battle is that you have to attack to get your tech levels go up, then when you're at the tech level you need to use an item or spell, you use it, but not before then. Spells and items have prerequisite levels too, so they can only be placed on the appropriate level or higher. If you put them on a lower level, it reduces their potency, and as such, if you put them on a high level, their potency is increased. Some items are an exception though and can only be placed on the appropriate level. This would all be fine, except it's extremely confusing at first, and everything on this grid can only be used once per battle, with the exception of some items which allow you to use them the 5 times. This means really planning your attacks correctly and using the appropriate element against your foes, because you're only going to be able to use a move once and then it's exhausted. Speaking of using the appropriate element on your foes, enemies have an infinity element, and if you use the same element on them, most of the time it just heals them, so you have to use the opposite. Funny enough, this doesn't work for the player, so the game just is being a stinking cheat. There's also this mechanic called field effect, which basically is every time you use an element, it slowly changes the battlefield to that element, and supposedly it affects the power of certain elements, but I found that in practice it rarely did and seemed to only affect summons, so maybe I didn't notice it, or I was just doing something wrong. Both are possible because I'm trash at video games after all, but this system just doesn't seem to work properly, and some of the guides I read online say that most people can't seem to figure out how to make this work properly either. Many people even say it doesn't have any effect at all. If I'm being honest here, the battle system overall just feels a bit lacking. It's a huge letdown if you've come off of Chrono Trigger, but it's far from the worst I've experienced, and once you get past its quirks, it's far from a terrible one though. What is kind of a big no-no for me personally though is the leveling system. Let's get something straight. I actually find grinding as an option to be important for JRPGs, and I use the word option very, very carefully here. Not to say that I love grinding, but sometimes it's nice to have the option to overcome a difficult boss or obstacle. Chrono Cross is like the anti-grind game. If Chrono Cross was a park, it would be one that bans all skateboards and rollerblades because it takes a direct stance against any and all grinding of any kind. Instead of having traditional leveling, you have growth levels, which are directly tied to story progression. After achieving a new growth level, you get small increments of stat boost for maybe 3 or 4 battles, followed by never having a reason to grind again until you lock the next growth level. This basically means that your character's abilities, strength, damage, output, all of that are tied to story progression. In some capacity though, this is helpful from a development side of things because it means developers can design bosses and obstacles with the player's possible level in mind. But it kind of removes one of the most core components of JRPGs for me. One of the things that I've always loved about JRPGs is how you level up semi-frequently as opposed to Western RPGs, which usually have smaller level caps but larger level gains. It kind of makes leveling up this small reward that you receive regularly for playing as sort of a subtle encouragement, whereas Western RPGs make leveling up a grandiose thing that happens after a major accomplishment. They both have their merits, but I just prefer the former. And it's part of why I love Japanese RPGs. Unfortunately, that means that Chrono Cross has regularly deprived me of that dopamine hit which I desperately need. Which is a shame because after you get used to its clunky battle system, it can be quite fun, but battles without much in the way of reward can be off-putting to some. To make an awkward system even more awkward though, there's this mechanic called trap elements, which this game explains fairly early in, but I found it to be completely useless. Basically what you do is you set up a trap element, and if your enemy uses the same specific move the trap is made for, you'll steal that move for yourself indefinitely. In theory, this sounds like a cool mechanic, except you're more or less just guessing what enemies would even have the move you're looking for. Unless you're reading a guide online, I don't think many people end up using these trap elements the correct way most of the time. When everything is said and done though, you have a system that, while a little bit awkward, is somewhat usable when you get the hang of it. Maybe the developer should have spent less time developing a system that generates almost offensive level accents for characters and text, and more time making a battle system that's actually fun and engaging. Level design wise though, Chrono Cross doesn't just feel smaller than its predecessor, it is smaller than its predecessor. The entirety of Chrono Cross takes place in a small set of islands called El Nido, which is just off the coast of the western continent in the Chrono Trigger universe. This means that while Chrono Trigger took place across the entire world, Chrono Cross takes place in a small section. This isn't inherently a bad thing though. I'd rather have a smaller map that's more fleshed out than a large one with nothing in it, that's for sure. And Chrono Cross definitely delivers there. There's a lot to see, and the game definitely focuses on making the areas that you do go to very diverse, albeit the absence of time travel and time periods like the previous game is a small letdown. While the actual geography you explore is smaller in scale, that doesn't mean the stakes are. We'll get to that though. Mechanically, the game plays decent enough, but it always feels like so many of its systems are trying so hard to be an evolution of Final Fantasy VII's materia system, but not in the best possible way. It's a shame because I think there is a bit more polish that could be done here, and it would really be something. But what we're left with is far from terrible, but just not memorable to me. If you're hellbent on experiencing Chrono Trigger's battle system again, definitely don't expect it from Chrono Cross. You're better off playing I Am Setsuna instead, which is also a pretty decent game. The most interesting part about Chrono Cross's battle system definitely has to be the plethora of playable characters. This game has a lot of them, like a lot. I think there's like 30 possible party members, and that means you can basically build the party that you want and play the game your own way. That amount of freedom should be praised, and I can see that being appealing to some people, but for me personally, I just found the huge amount of characters a bit overwhelming and found myself just sticking to a few of my favorites. As far as the visuals go, the game looks pretty great for a PlayStation 1 game, and some parts are teetering towards PlayStation 2 level visuals. Cutscenes look great, and they're a real treat to see. Even if they aren't the anime style cutscenes that were added in the PlayStation 1 version of Chrono Trigger, I've always loved seeing the cutscenes in this game, and they actually have aged quite decently. And of course, you can't talk about design without talking about music, and Chrono Cross does have some pretty decent music, but it's not going to hit as hard as the original game, and definitely won't be as memorable. Still, it's pretty decent, and it gets the job done. Though I have to admit, the opening cutscene and its music just absolutely shred. While this video has barely even started and I spent a good chunk of it already complaining about this game, we haven't even gotten to the story yet. I promise the rest of the video isn't just me ragging on the game. Anyway, we should move on. I can't really say that this story is going to be easy to explain, as I'm pretty sure you would need an advanced degree in several high discipline fields to truly dissect what's going on here. And sadly, I am just a very stupid YouTube man who has a meager 2-year degree in being bad at games. I'm fairly sure that even my wife would be more qualified to talk about this game, and she doesn't even play video games. But sadly, you get me, so buckle up as I try to explain what is even going on in this game. In Chrono Cross, you play as Surge, blue-haired anime pretty boy protagonist. The game begins with a dream sequence of events that happens later in the game. After the dream sequence, Surge is tasked by his future waifu to go find some kimono dragon scales. Something that seems to be such a common trope in JRPGs. The first task is so simple, and it sets off a chain of events that defy any and all reason. And Chrono Cross is no exception to this, as upon doing this, he travels to a nearby beach near his hometown where he is transported to an alternate dimension where he died 10 years ago. The goal here is to try to figure out why. It's here where he runs into Kid, a hilarious Australian stereotype who fights against a mysterious catman named Lynx, who serves as the antagonist for most of the game. The two team up with various other characters, far too many to cover in this video without it going on for hours and hours on end. Before I go any further, I should probably acknowledge that this game requires a decent amount of knowledge of Chrono Trigger's story to understand what's even going on here, so I should probably warn you, once again, spoilers ahead for Chrono Trigger if you haven't played it. If you haven't played it, then please stop this video and go play the entire game before continuing. See, Chrono Cross takes place in the year 1020 AD, which is about 20 years after the characters of Chrono Trigger set off to save the world. But something happened in the year 1010 to Surge in an alternate timeline to where he died. Surge spends a good chunk of this adventure chasing after Lynx, which requires the player to hop between two different dimensions. This is basically the mechanic that replaces the time travel from Chrono Trigger, and it works worse in every possible way in my opinion. The two worlds look fairly similar with minor changes for most part, and it lacks that level of intrigue that seeing the different time periods did in Chrono Trigger. Also, to add icing onto the crap cake, it's way more annoying to do. Swapping between the two worlds can only be done on a very specific spot in the game's world map that must be traveled to every single time. And that's the beach where it happens for the first time. You have to go back here every single time. It's very tedious, and for the life of me, I cannot figure out why they chose to do it like this. Because Chrono Trigger had a much better system for hopping between worlds by jumping in the epoch or using different time portals. Still, in concept, it's a neat idea to hop between the two worlds, but I kind of felt they really just played it a little too safe, as again, the two worlds aren't drastically different for most of the game. In this parallel world, Surge dies as a kid 10 years ago, and as I said before, he has to figure out why. With the help of Kid and several others, he encounters Harley, a girl who's aiding Lynx, and after enough time, Surge and Lynx come face to face. This is where the game takes the weirdest turn, and Surge and Lynx switch bodies, leading to you to spend half the game playing as Lynx. It's a real surprise if I'm honest, and not one I was expecting, but kind of in a good way. It begins a series of points the player must ask what self means, especially because you spend almost as much time being Lynx as you do being Surge. So it begs the question, could you be someone else long enough to where you know being them more than you know being yourself? Regardless, Surge and his team try to get his original body back, all while Lynx is using Surge's body to commit horrible evil across the world. Here's where the story gets very complicated, so I'm going to butcher the absolute hell out of it, and I apologize in advance, but this game's story is pretty confusing, and to be extremely concise about it would require an extremely long video. So again, I apologize. Surge, as Lynx, travels to a place called the Dead Sea, which is a place that was frozen in time and space. It was created by one of the great gurus in Zeo creating Chronopolis, a large facility in the year 2400 AD, and it gets thrown into the past via some kind of time crash. Since then, the facility has been using a computer system called Fate to keep the two dimensions stabilized. It turns out that Surge's existence is that of the Arbiter of the Frozen Flame. When Surge was a child, he was bitten by a poisonous creature, and his father brought him to the Dead Sea and discovered the Chronopolis facility. The facility system recognized Surge as the Arbiter. The Frozen Flame is some kind of key to everything that's been going on due to what it is. See, in the end of Chrono Trigger, when Chrono and his friends defeated Lavos, he splintered off a piece of himself that became the Frozen Flame. The facility had been using the flame's power to stabilize the dimensions and control the timeline, but Surge's emergence stands to disrupt all of that. We even see the cast of Chrono Trigger appear in flashbacks. Keep in mind, most of this happens close to the end of the game, too. In an alternate timeline, Dinopolis, a city of reptites, from the timeline where humans never existed, clash with Chronopolis, and there's this great war, which results in Dinopolis sending their dragon god, which got split into several different dragons after that. Okay, saying all this out loud, this sounds absolutely bonkers, but I'm not going to explain the entire story in nitty-gritty detail because, truthfully, even after looking up the hours of research for this game, I still am very confused on what's even going on in this game. We find out that Lynx is actually a physical manifestation of Fate, the computer from Chronopolis. Surge defeats him, the dragons, and basically everyone under the sun, and the world is saved. Except it isn't. Keeping true to the absolute bonkers writing, a greater, higher threat villain is introduced late in the game called the Time Devourer. It was created from Scala from Chrono Trigger fused with Lavos near the end of the game. In the DS version of Chrono Trigger, there's actually an additional boss fight that covers this. Also, for some reason, she's blonde now. Not really sure why. The only way to get the true ending, though, is to do a very specific sequence of attacks to change the field to a very specific sequence of colors, and then use the Chrono Cross, an item that was acquired when Surge fused a set of items from both timelines. It's really tricky to do and kind of annoying because this thing just keeps messing up your color sequences. When the player uses the Chrono Cross correctly, though, which is ironically not shaped like a cross by the way, the Time Devourer is defeated and Scala is separated from him. The timeline is restored and the game basically never happened. Oh yeah, and Kid is revealed to be Scala's clone daughter from another reality who is now reborn as Scala or something. It's all really confusing, and again, I am butchering the ever-living hell out of it, but that's the real problem, is that this game's story is far too complicated to explain in a video of this length. It's definitely a wild ride, but I can't say I particularly like the story that much. My biggest issue is that it has so little to do with Chrono Trigger up to the end of the game. And then when it does tie to Chrono Trigger, it just feels really weird and strange. It was endearing to see some locations from Chrono Trigger make an appearance, such as the domes, but it just doesn't tie in that well. Not to mention it makes what the player accomplished in Chrono Trigger feel pointless, especially when it's revealed that Luca is killed shortly after the events of Chrono Trigger. It just feels really anticlimactic to kill off a character like that. It's definitely a story that wasn't really for me, but I know many people love this game and praise its layered storytelling, and hey, I'm usually the guy that loves layered storytelling. My favorite anime of all time is Boogie Pop Phantom. but this just missed the mark for me personally. I still attest that it's a great game, but I just couldn't get into it as much as other people do. Chrono Cross feels like it set out to try and top Chrono Trigger, and I think that mentality stunted its ability to achieve greatness, as its primary focus was focusing on not living in the shadow of its predecessor. And I think it does that a little too well. So many moments I forgot I was even playing a Chrono game, and if it wasn't for the victory music from battles reminding me, I feel like I would have forgotten entirely until the end of the game. Most of the game's story doesn't really have much to do with Chrono Trigger until close to maybe the last 20% of the game even. I can appreciate what they were trying to do, and maybe with more time and technology the game's story could have been done more justice, but I think this just stands as a monument of trying to go beyond what the creators were capable of delivering. What you're left with is a story that is at the very least interesting. I mean, I'm absolutely fascinated with what's going on here, but it's one that will turn a lot of people off with how absolutely confusing it is. With a myriad of characters and subplots and convoluted theories of alternate dimensions and time, it's really rough to follow. I don't think ChatGPT can even truly wrap its head around this thing. Don't get me wrong, I did enjoy the story a little bit, and by the time it does get to referencing Chrono Trigger, it really starts to get interesting, but it's full of retcons and plot inconsistencies with the original that it just comes off as jarring. I feel like if they've gone with a more simplistic approach and scaled back their vision, the game would have been much more excellent. The trend of Square Enix going harder than they need to would continue for years though.
Real heroes don't need plans.
I appreciate the effort though, even if it didn't land so well with me. I can appreciate that this game even exists because we at least got some kind of sequel to Chrono Trigger. I doubt you could tell it by this point in the video, but I genuinely wanted to love this game. I mean, it's a sequel to the greatest game ever made. It's a sequel to this. But at the end of the day, it just went so far off the rails in terms of what made Chrono Trigger great for me. The biggest question most would have is, why did this happen? Well, the answer is fairly simple. Chrono Cross was developed by a different development team, and they didn't want to rehash the same time travel plot of Chrono Trigger, so instead they wanted to do something different. I think also because the development team wasn't the same, they didn't understand the source material nearly as well, and this results in retcons, rewrites, and plot inconsistencies. There's so much more that I didn't even cover in this video, because it would just make it way too long. What is the most jarring to me though is the character designs, which don't even try to resemble the work done by Toriyama in the first game. And while I can't blame them for not replicating his style, the characters don't even feel like they belong in the same game sometimes. Some of the characters you acquire are just completely removed from the world they're in, and they just don't feel like they belong at all. The writing room in this game was clearly just a bunch of people going, what if we added this character, over and over again, until the cast of characters had reached a level of unsustainable, and it's just a damn shame. There are a few characters that stand out really well if you can get past their annoying to read accents, which sometimes make it impossible to understand what they're even trying to say. Seriously, that feature just kinda sucks in this game. I could barely understand what Harley was saying a lot of the time. When it comes to extra features though, Chrono Cross naturally has New Game Plus, which it would be a cardinal sin for it to not have it considering Chrono Trigger technically created the concept, which you use to unlock better weapons, more characters, and max out your growth levels to make the game an absolute cakewalk. However, that's all somewhat unnecessary in the remaster because it includes a feature that drastically scales the difficulty of battles back with the press of a button, meaning that you probably won't have to do that if you don't really want to. That's something I haven't really talked about this entire time. How is this game's remaster compared to the original since I own the original? Well, the character models look better and it's a nice 60 frames per second most of the time, but other than that, I can't exactly call this a stellar remaster. The work put into touching up the game wasn't extensive and I consider it somewhat of a bare bones re-release. It does bring the resolution up and make it playable in modern consoles, so that's a plus, but there's quite a few issues and as far as I can tell, the PC version apparently has even more. Apparently though, there is some additional content if you finish Radical Dreamers, which was translated and included with this release, so there's that. Overall, it's still one of the best ways to experience this game, so if you're going to pick it up, this is the version I'd recommend getting if you can't get your hands on an original PlayStation 1. I know I may have been super critical of this game in this video, but I promise that I actually enjoyed many aspects of it. The issue is that it's trying to be a sequel to Chrono Trigger, a game that basically just can't hold a candle to. I know that it wasn't possible for anyone to live up to the standards set by the Dream Team that made the original game, but I don't think anyone can blame me for still being disappointed at what could have been. I can't stress this enough, but overall I do think this is a good game, but it could have just been a much better one with some changes. Perhaps a restructuring of the story. I don't know if it'd ever live up to Chrono Trigger, but it would have at least stood on its own as a unique game. At the end of the day, it's a personal taste thing, and to me, I have an extreme distaste for RPGs that actually block leveling behind story progression, as I feel it kind of ruins the freedom of them. Chrono Cross is a game that feels at odds with itself, unsure if it wants to be a sequel, a spin-off, or its own unique adventure with minor tie-ins to its predecessor. Still, I'm glad that I played it. It is still at the end of the day an experience that I feel is important to gaming, and it's still quite an impressive achievement. I can only wonder what could have been if they had decided to push it back and rebuild it for the PlayStation 2 when it came out, but I doubt we'll ever know that. At least we have a potential remaster of Final Fantasy XIII to look forward to. Right? Right? We don't want to spend our lives wondering what could have been, so in a way, I'm glad Chrono Cross exists, even if it's not the game that I had hoped it would be, and it's not the sequel that I felt Chrono Trigger deserves. From my understanding, though, tons of people love this game, and many felt that it was a great follow-up to Chrono Trigger, and some actually only played this game and not Chrono Trigger, and to that I say,
what's wrong with you?
In all seriousness, though, if Chrono Cross is your favorite game and you prefer it over Chrono Trigger, or even if you've never played the original Chrono Trigger, or you love it to death and watching this video has been painful to you, I apologize. You are entitled to your thoughts on it, and I'd never want to take that away from you, and I'd like to remind people that you don't have to agree with my opinion, and that's not what these videos are about, but more or less just to give you my perspective, and possibly just to entertain people. And yes, I will admit, maybe I'm not looking at this all the correct way. However, in the interest of not being inspired by others, I chose purposely not to watch other video essays about the game prior to playing it, or prior to writing this script. So there's a great possibility that after looking at someone else's analysis, I could find myself dead wrong and change my stance on that, and that's okay. I find it's important to look at it from many perspectives. But in this case, I wanted to give my perspective first so that I wasn't influenced by others. At the end of the day, I feel just some kind of regret that it's over. A feeling of knowing that this is likely all we will get to the greatest game of all time, and it just ends on this note. We keep getting rumors every year about a possible Chrono Trigger remake, but I doubt they will get that, and I've been let down so many times on that train that I'd rather not get on it once more. Rather than get my hopes up for what might never come, I'll take solace in knowing that at least we got Chrono Cross, even if it wasn't what I expected it would be. And anyways, we can always go back and play the original game, which I will probably do a million times. I guess it is true. You really can't dethrone the king, can you? Thank you to everyone for watching. I know I rambled on a lot during this video. If you're new to the channel, I do retrospectives of games, mostly retro ones, and you should check out some of my other videos. To my returning viewers, thank you for popping back in to listen to Millennial ramble about nostalgia, and please make sure to like the video and share it with everyone to help me out. I do these videos entirely by myself, editing, game footage, scripting, everything. So I had put a lot of work into them, and it means the world to me when people watch them and enjoy them. I have a goal to reach 1,000 subscribers this year, and if you could help, that would be awesome if you guys could help make that come true. This is WizPlay, and that's enough of that.